in the participant list. So without further ado, let's get started on today's Young Professionals webinar. So today we present the first webinar of 2014 entitled Leadership Excellence, which will be brought to you by Corey Atkinson, who is a leadership and performance specialist for a company called Dimensions of Leadership. So today I will be your host. I kindly ask that anybody who has their mic on. Great. My name is Mario Milicevic, and I'm the host for today's webinar. I'm the current Vice Chair of Products and Services for the MGA Young Professionals Committee, as well as the Chair of the Toronto Young Professionals Affinity Group. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Young Professionals webinar series of 2014, which will feature a monthly webinar. So some of our monthly webinars will feature topics such as effective communication, leadership. We have an exciting webinar coming up featuring the best of the Consumer Electronics Show, as well as humanitarian outreach, and many, many more. So just to go over some quick webinar etiquette, I once again kindly ask that you keep your microphones muted for the duration of the webinar, just to prevent and eliminate any feedback that you might hear. And I would like to emphasize that you are encouraged to ask questions during the webinar. So please type the questions in that you have into the chat box, preferably either to myself, Mario, or to everybody. And that way everyone can see your questions. And so what's going to happen then at the very end of the webinar, we will feature a 5-minute question and answer session. So please type your questions into the chat box and send them to everybody, and then I will moderate the Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce to you the new name and new feel to a group formerly known as GOLD, which is now known as the IEEE Young Professionals. So IEEE GOLD, also known as the Graduates of the Last Decade, was not instantly recognized as a Young Professionals group. And so this new name as IEEE Young Professionals really makes it easier to find information and benefits relevant to young professionals in the IEEE. And the name change was mostly driven by the fact that we wanted a group to be instantly recognizable. And we've had two key successes with this new name change. One was a networking mixer in Toronto, which featured over 300+ attendees in November, as well as a brand launch event held during the Global Humanitarian Technology Conference by the Santa Clara Valley section and the Santa Clara Valley Young Professionals Group. So I'd like to point you to a link here in case you have any questions or interests about what's going on in the world of young professionals. You can visit IEEE.org/YP and navigate to the Gold Rush blog. So today's webinar is entitled Leadership Excellence, Part 1. Our speaker today is Corey Atkinson, who is a leadership and performance specialist. Corey has extensive experience in leadership, client service, and business development, and really focuses on supporting others to become great at what they do. Leadership Excellence Part 1 today will basically cover the key steps to personal and team organizational leadership, and will help give you a roadmap to help you get started on building your own personal and team organization. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Corey Atkinson to host today's webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mario, and welcome everyone to Leadership Excellence. Very excited to be hosting this webinar for all of you, and hopefully give you 2 or 3 things that you can either be more aware of or even put in action as you continue on or start or plan on passing off your leadership ideas to other people. I've been in the world of leadership for a long time, and I've had a chance to work with many different organizations, from for-profit to non-profit, local here in Canada to international. And over the next, we'll say, 20 minutes, I'm going to give you some things to think about. So if you are able to, if you've got your technology in terms of your smart stuff or a tablet or a piece of paper, so that this sticks, there are going to be a couple things you're going to want to write down as we go through. So let's get into this. I want to make the most of your time and start off with a very simple rhetorical question. how important is leadership today? And that's pretty obvious. Many people say it's very important, but yet, you know, we don't always spend a lot of time on it. Many organizations I've worked with, they often find that leadership and development is often more the responsibility of the individual than it is the organization. And, you know, sometimes they might be right, sometimes they might be wrong. But I thought that one of the best ways to really hit home with this would be to give you some numbers that impact how leadership has made a difference. Over the past 10 years, we've had a huge shift in the way our world has worked, from the economics and, of course, the environment. And a study was done just recently, and they wanted to find out how much did leadership impact the bottom line. And they looked at how much do they develop talents and what type of pipeline or leadership pipeline do they have in the organization. And when they checked out or went and discussed the survey with a number of different organizations, they came up with these 6 drivers: financial performance, productivity, quality, right down to satisfaction internally and externally, and can you keep your people? And organizations that spent a lot of time on leadership, in that they even went as far as making sure the employee or individual performer was talking to their manager or upline at least once or twice a month about leadership, a minimum of about 1 hour a month. They found that organizations that spent that much time on leadership, even in discussion, not just in the training room, saw this type of performance over a 5-year period. They saw, of course, financial performance increase, productivity increase, quality of their products and services increase, customer satisfaction, as well as employee satisfaction, and even retention of quality employees. So you can see that when you do the work, when you stick to it, it can make a difference. Now, there's a lot of numbers to take in here. So the ones I'd like for you to maybe make a note of, depending on your industry, sector, age, would be this one. The first one is financial performance. Just because, for example, if I was working with a Mario, and because he and I talked about leadership, we kept it on the top of our mind, we made commitments and we followed through, we saw our performance increase by 19%, regardless of where that comes from, whether it be cutbacks or innovation. Another number you should keep in mind is customer satisfaction, 20%. From the days of old of bartering to today, the best way to keep your customers is to keep the ones you have. And if you can increase their satisfaction by just taking care of the people inside, look how your satisfaction will increase just by talking about leadership. And last one, of course, we live in a world now where it's all about knowledge, and not even just knowledge, but the ability to take ideas and make them create something. So if you can keep your people, obviously you can see what happens, 27% less turnover, and that, of course, trickles down. So leadership really impacts the bottom line. So the question is, in our world, is where do we begin? And as you can see here, with downsizing, layoffs, restructuring, developing leadership is critical. And as we sit here in 2014, our population at 7.1 or 7 billion people, projected to go to 8 billion in the next 20 years, we're going to have to work together better, whether it be across the city, across the street, or across the great ponds of the Atlantics or the Pacific Oceans. So I thought I'd give you a couple things to think about. First one is that leadership excellence, it isn't just about all of you that are on the phone right now with me. It's really about the people around you, regardless of the size of your organization. So with that in mind, there's 3 things to keep in mind. So just for our time together, I'm going to talk about these things. First, leadership excellence is about distinctions. Then it's about goals, but how do you get those goals? And then the role of trust, which isn't new, but I'll give you some ideas on how to build trust quickly so that it makes a difference. So let's start off with distinctions. And I got a quote here that I use in many of my programs, and it comes from Albert. And Albert Einstein said that the world we live in is very different. And if we're going to create different results, we've got to be different leaders. So the question is, what does it take to be a leader today? And you'll see here, I've got leadership excellence is really about the product of our thinking. The world we've created around us is a product of our way of thinking. If we see the glass half full, the world, of course, is going to be negative. If it's half empty, we can see the other side. So with that way of thinking, we've got to start thinking about where do we fit in terms of what the type of organizations we've joined. So one of the distinctions that I like to get people to think about, sorry about this, everyone, is what are the rules that you're playing right now? What type of organization are you working in? Regardless of size, whether it be a 2- or 3-person team or you've got a multinational. What are the rules? What type of organization it is? And really high level, this is for you to jot down, everybody. There's 3 types that you should be mindful of that then allows you to understand what type of leadership role you need. The first one is the reactive organizations. These are the why it happened, who is to blame organizations. I'm not naming names, but these are organizations that aren't able to roll with the punches. A good book written a few years back by this gentleman named Jim Collins called Good to Great. He analyzed a number of businesses, and he noticed what they did to go from being good to great, and they were not reactive. They were more on the generative or responsive side. Organizations that have sort of gone the way of the dodo bird are organizations that don't really account for themselves, and they look at the environment versus within to see where they can make changes. So that's one organization you want to start looking at. Are you in that type of organization? The next one is the responsive, and these organizations, they're pretty good. They respond to facts, but they can also be a little bit slow. Without pointing fingers, you'll find sometimes our leading worlds of academia and our universities and academic opportunities, sometimes they're even a little slow. I'm not saying all of them, but I find in my own world, education seems to be sort of late on really adopting to the changes they need. Not everybody does, but that's just something to be mindful of. So those that have strong relationship to facts, they are good, but they might be missing out. The organization that I think most of us would love to be around is the generative organization, or adaptive, where breakthrough thinking is a strategy, constant focus on solutions. Now, I notice we have quite a wide group of people on the phone, and all I can do is, of course, give you a quick example of our famous Google. Google's been around for a long time, and they've done some great things and actually being a part of our vernacular. But they've also taken the time recently to make sure that if they really adapt to the circumstances of their business in terms of how they treat their people, that will help them stay on the cutting edge. And as you know, Google is doing some great things. So that's just one example. You can even have it even in the world of airlines. Here in Canada, we have Porter, and they've been a very generative, adaptive organization, are doing some breakthrough things in the world of airlines. So the question you have, of course, is where do you fit on this list? Maybe it's not even necessarily organizational. Maybe it's reactive in terms of department, but it's responsive in terms of organization. Or you're generative in terms of your department, but your organization is very reactive. And if you have discord between those, it's going to be hard for you to always get to the next level of leadership. You can get there, but it does take some work. So obviously, when I ask groups, where does everyone want to be? Most people, of course, want to be in the generative or adaptive organization. But the question really is, to get there, what has to change about you and I? What do we have to do differently to get there? So I thought I'd share with you a couple of things that you can do. And the first thing is understand that leadership excellence are 6 components. You'll see them here. It's about setting direction. It's about mobilizing action. It's about building capability. If you stick around and throughout the summer, I'll actually give you a 4th element, but these are the 3 starters. But to set direction, you've got to inspire trust. To mobilize, you have to master communication. To be capable, you've got to be able to have great teams. For our little discussion today, we'll only focus on direction and inspiring a little bit of trust. And so that way, you moving in the right direction. And so when I talk about setting direction, which we all know leaders have to do, you'll see here they set direction by clearly stating where we are going, what's expected, and what will be used to track success. Great stuff, but at the end of the day, it's boring. It's the kind of stuff that sometimes people who sit in the back row of a team meeting will go, yeah, that's nice, let me just get back to my office, or let me get back to my emails. So we have to be different, right? We have to realize that it's even more than greeting goals. It's really about building relationships of trust through character and competence is really where it happens. And to do that, you've got to have some ideas. What can I do to build trust? So if we want to be clear on these distinctions and we want to understand how we set direction, we have to be able to realize that we have to move from something that most of us do well, which is managing things, projects, to leading others, which takes time. And the best way to get there is to shift our thinking. Remember my comments or my quote from Albert Einstein, our world is a product of our thinking. So the thing I like to get people to start thinking about is what's the difference between management and leadership? Well, you can jot this down. Management is about goals and plans. Leadership is about vision and values. And organizations, individuals who understand the vision and can incorporate values are those that lead with excellence. It takes time, it takes a different way of thinking, and it's not easy to do. So So when we talk about this, how do you manage that? And you see here, leadership excellence is about balancing the time spent between management activities and, of course, leadership activities. So with that in mind, I thought, really, it's going to be about establishing trust and respect, right? But what does this look like in the workplace? We all know that we want to be respected, we want to be trusted, but what does that really look like to the average person? So my question for all of you, rhetorical, because when we have such a large group, is if you had to build trust with a project team, where would you start? What would be your first key steps? And I'm sure many of you have different ideas on how to do that, but I would tell you that it takes a little bit of work. So to do this, oops, sorry about that. Let me just, I pressed the wrong button there, sorry about that, everyone. To do this, I'm going to give you something to think about. And again, we'll keep it simple because time is of the essence. But to really build trust quickly, you've got to start with where your people are at. Yes, it takes all of the great things like credibility, respect, fairness. These are the typical answers that I get. Corey, you got to be credible. You got to build respect. You got to be fair. All great. But what we have forgotten is that we live in a different world. The generation below many of you are 12s to our 20-year-olds, depending on who's on the phone. There are millennials. And the millennials, they think about themselves all the time. So if you want to build trust and respect with others, you've got to think about them as well. So you see, I've got my little picture here. I've got my money, and I've got time. And my question is, what do you value more? Now, many people, depending on where they are, they'll say time. Corey, I wish I had more time. But if you have a lot of time and no money, life can be a little depressing. But if you have a lot of money and no time, it can be depressing as well. So the question is, if you really want to lead with excellence, yes, credibility, respect, and fairness are important, but I would throw out to you that you really want to start off, you really want to start with what people value. So here's a test for you all as you sit back and watch the screen. I'm going to share with you the top values that most individuals have within an organization. You'll see here values are important because they affect us in very different ways. They affect our decisions. They are standards to guide us. So if they are so important to us, what do people really value? So the question you have to ask yourself is, first, as a leader, what do you value? Do you value the fringe benefits of an organization? Do you value advancement opportunities, good salary recognition, job security? You might have a combination, but to build leadership excellence, to be a leader, to be a person that leads with excellence, you have to know what your team and your people value. Now, you'll find here when I ask people this, I get lots of different questions. And it can even be different answers. And it can even be different even whether it be a management group, senior VPs, or even employees or performers. But until leaders find out what people value, you will not move ahead in this new world that we move in here in our 2010s. Now, I can tell you this, if you want to jot some things down, that the key ones that most people seem to be responding to in the work that I've done, at least throughout the Ontario, Toronto, Canada area, is challenging work, great work environment, and colleagues that get along. Those last three at the bottom seem to be the ones that are the most popular, but again, depending on where you are, they might change. But once you know what people value, then you can begin the conversation of what trust and respect is all about. So here's the question for you. What do you think your people value? And if you're truly excited about this topic, you would sit back and depending on where you are, regardless if you are a team leader or even a team member, you should take the time to jot some names down. Take a guess at what you think they value and then enter into conversations with them to find out if you are on the right page. Your answers will be great no matter what. If you're wrong, new insights and opportunities. If you're right, now it's what are you doing to keep that in mind? And then where do they fall in that spectrum? How much do they want to bring that to the table? But once you find these things out, and you notice what I have here from a career and work perspective, you set the table for now setting direction. Ladies and gentlemen, that in a nutshell is leadership excellence. Understanding the game you play in terms of distinctions, understanding goals really starts with understanding what people value, and then when you understand what they value, that will give you a little bit insight into the role of trust and where to begin. Now, before I wrap things up and I turn things back over to Mario, I have to give you an example. Going back to the airlines, and I'm going from a North American point of view, everyone, just to give you some context. About 10 years ago, Continental Airlines had a huge problem. They were faced with huge layoffs because, of course, the airline industry was not working out well for them. Because the organization had gone from putting their values and motto and mission statements not just on the wall but living it on a day-to-day experience with their people, before they went about doing the layoffs, the people and the performers, the baggage handlers, and whoever was involved felt they had enough courage that they went up to senior management and told them, instead of laying off everybody, why don't we just work part-time so that way people's lives won't be affected. Because they knew that the organization trusted them, they built trust, they respected them, they felt confident to share with their people, share with uplines what they thought, and then even more exciting, management took their advice, put it into action. Now you can imagine, if you'd gone up to somebody, you were in an organization and you said, you know what, I know that my friend Mohammed here might be moving on, my friend Wong might be moving on, or my friend Michael might be moving on. Instead of doing that, can we find a way to keep everybody engaged and committed to the workplace? You can imagine the ripple effects, the commitment, the trust, just of sheer enjoyment that you're in a workplace where you want to be. It starts with distinctions, understanding how to set goals, which is about values, which will then lead you to trust. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Leadership Excellence Part 1. We could go on and on where we should go with this and the trials and tribulations, but I do want to get you thinking about what can you do come tomorrow, Monday, when you get back to work with your teams. My name is Corey Atkinson. It's been great. I'm going to turn it back over to Mario. And Mario, maybe yourself, or if you've been monitoring the chat window, I have some time to take a couple of questions on what we've talked about today. Mario?
Perfect. Thank you very much, Corey. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. All right. So we have a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat. The first one comes from Hassan. So Hassan's question is, it seems that reactive and responsive organizations may have similar characteristics. Is that sometimes the case?
Yes, that would definitely be the case. Hassan, you make a good point there. Reason they'd be similar is because of depending on, I would really make the difference between the two in that reactive ones, they won't learn from their mistakes. Now, you can still be responsive and react to the scenario, but the ones that are responsive will then learn from their mistakes. They'll take a turn. They'll find a way to shift. Hassan, a great example of that goes back about 10 years ago, or about 15 years ago, when the most popular type of device was our electronic typewriters by a company called Brother. And Brother was actually in conversations with Hewlett-Packard and Compaq, and they had broached them that they said they wanted to create a laptop. And Brother, who was #1 in terms of the world, in terms of electric typewriters, was not open to where they were going. They wanted to play it safe with the electric typewriter, and of course that organization has gone the way of the dodo bird. So they can be similar in nature, but it's what do they do once they've got the information? Do they continue to just be reactive, or do they respond and make a move to sort of go with the tide? So hopefully that helps you out, Hassan. Next question, Mario.
Thank you, Corey. Yeah, our next question comes from Tim Warboys, who asks, who says that this talk, your talk today has focused a lot on leadership in the workplace. However, how does this change when dealing with volunteers? So it obviously becomes harder to sit down and have one-on-ones and talk about leadership. So how do you suggest dealing with these limitations when dealing with volunteers as opposed to employees?
Okay, who's the name of the person that asked that question, Mario?
Tim Warboys.
Tim's comment, everybody, those who are listening, Tim, you've seen through my potholes, Tim. When it comes to volunteering, that is a whole different conversation. I often say to people, I read it a long time ago, Tim, I'm not taking credit for it, but I say to sometimes, if you really want to know if you are really a great leader, go lead a volunteer organization. That is very different, Tim, and I can only tell you that building probably trust and understanding values and being very forthright with the challenges of what you're dealing with more often on a more regular basis would be some of the things I'd recommend when it comes to leading volunteer organizations. There you really have to get in step with, is the person there because of different aspirations? They want to pad a resume, they want to get something out of it personally, or are they there for purely altruistic means or needs? And then can you give them what they need so they keep coming back And are you even clear on what's reasonable in terms of expectations? So, Tim, if you want to stay in touch with me, you can always find me online, dimensionofleadership.com, Corey at Dimension of Leadership. I would be more than willing to talk with you about that. But this focus today would definitely speak more to the organization in terms of employees. But, Tim, good question that it's not the same in every scenario. Hopefully that helps them out. Next question, Mario.
Thanks, Corey. Yeah, we have one more from Hugo. So Hugo asks, what about a team with more than one leader? How do you manage this sort of situation?
Okay, well, that's a tough one, Hugo. I would probably recommend, Hugo, you just quit, go find another job. I'm just kidding, just kidding. Hugo, that's a little tricky. If Hugo, you're the person that's the other co-leader, then there's going to have to be a lot of listening has to be done between the two leaders to really get people on the same page. They have to be honest on what could happen. Priorities could change in terms of personal priorities. When things go too fast, how do we respond? How do we deal with difficult situations? There almost has to be a lot of teamwork that goes on between the two leaders before they move forward. And they have to be honest with themselves to know that things don't always last forever. And if you can have those conversations when tough times come, can you part ways amicably? If you are, Hugo, somebody who's reporting to two different leaders, that's another tough one where you're going to want to really put on your thinking cap and find some tactful, diplomatic ways of how to understand where both leaders are coming from if there's some disconnect between the two. But again, those require some, if you're the two leaders or more than one, a lot of bonding and a lot of really understanding the lay of land and sort of rules of engagement have to be had. If you're somebody else in terms of your reporting upline, then you really have to understand what's going on and understand the egos at play if that's an issue, and then understand what's going to be fair for you in terms of your day-to-day stress levels, because that could be a little tricky. Hugo, if you want to connect with me again, please do come follow up, but that does require a little bit more finesse and understanding what the leaders at play and the personalities at play. Hopefully that gives you some insight, but again, that would be something you'd want to talk with me further along the line. Mario, is that all we got for time for?
Those are all the questions that we've got. Corey, I've got one more question for you that I've come up with. You talked about how setting goals is important and building trust is important. However, I have a question. So how do you prioritize the goals that you set? So what if you want to maintain trust, but maintaining that trust would mean sacrificing profit? How do you prioritize your goals?
Well, that's a little trickier one. I often tell people that when it comes to
question, of course.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question because it does happen, and I think the thing, Mario, is you're going to have to get back to the basics, and sometimes it's going to be in this day and age you have to be clear, especially with social responsibility. You're going to have to be clear about what you stand for, and what are you willing to sacrifice, and that's going to be a tough decision, and depending on even the stakeholders involved, that could be pretty tough. So I can't say that there's a black and white answer to that one. But I can say to you that if you don't have a sort of charter, a value system, a vision statement that is crystal clear, those things will be difficult. But once those things are clear on your roadmap and what you want to stand for at the end of the day, then those decisions are quite clear. And if you want to be remembered more for profit than for how people felt in your organization, then you're going to make the decision from the get-go. But if that's not going to be something you're going to want to stand for, you got to realize that there might be a bigger game to play, and that might not be just about profit. But again, that's been a bit of an issue over our previous decade, where greed has really sort of dictated how people operate. So that's an ethical one, Mario, and I couldn't give you a black and white answer, but I could say here's a place to start looking for an answer that would resonate with you versus the next person. Hopefully that helps you.
Great, thanks. We have one last question from Parshva, the IEEE staff member who's facilitating our talk today. Parsh wants to know, how can you drive leadership values from a top-down hierarchy, especially if you want to use new or inexperienced employee, or if you want to have new and inexperienced employees involved, rather than a CEO or upper management making those decisions?
Parsh, That's a bit of a tricky one, because that's going to come down to, sorry about that. If you want to drive it, I think that in our day and age, Parsh, people, because of the way our world is working, you know, we've got our YouTube out there. You can go on Google and get anything you want. The hottest websites out now, at least from a North American point of view, are Pinterest and Instagram. I'm thinking that people are now in a place where they got to see it to believe it, Parsh. And if you want to drive values from the top down to connect with new team members, the person who states that vision in terms of leadership has got to be in front of the people that they want their values to resonate with. They cannot stay in the corner office. They cannot dictate to management or VP to roll this out at upcoming town halls. They've got to be in the town halls. They've got to be sitting in the lunchrooms with their people. They've got to be walking around and showing it. You can't do it 24/7, but if you want people to follow you, they've got to see you. And it can't be emails, text messages, or any fancy webinar. You've got to see it to believe it. I think that's where we're going, Parsh. If you want that to happen, you've got to be willing to get in the face of the people you want to lead, because when they see you there on a regular basis, trust builds a lot faster. Hopefully that helps you out, Parsh.
Great. Thank you very much, Corey. I think we've come to the end of our question and answer session. So I'd like to thank Corey at this point.
My pleasure, Mary. It's been great. Thank you very much for having me on the call.
Thank you very much, Corey. It's been a pleasure learning about leadership excellence. I believe I have one more slide to finish up. So thank you, everybody, for participating in today's brief webinar. We hope you've learned one or two key things that you can take away and apply to your own personal and organizational leadership skills. We do request that you complete the feedback survey that will be sent to you via email shortly after this webinar. And I'd like to announce that the next Young Professionals webinar will be held on Monday, March 3rd at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And that webinar will feature a panel discussion on the best of the consumer electronics show. At this point, I'd also like to introduce you to two new career-based services offered to young professionals. One of them is the IEEE Mentor Center, where mentors and mentees can connect online to facilitate a online or offline mentorship experience, as well as the Resume Lab, which is a brand new service offered to revamp your resume and help you really cater it to getting that next job you need. If you have any further suggestions for other products or services that you'd like to see in the Young Professionals portfolio, please do send us an email at young-professionals@IEEE.org or visit us on the website at IEEE.org/YP. Thank you once again, everybody, for listening to today's webinar, and thank you all for your questions. We hope you've enjoyed your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you very much, and have a great day.